Cornerstone, a podcast leading new thinking for the built environment.
Welcome to Cornerstone. As they navigate the impact of the global pandemic, governments across the world will seek to inject funds into large-scale developments in the healthcare, infrastructure, and life sciences sector to kickstart their economies. Against the backdrop of the international debt crisis resulting from the pandemic, governments find themselves in a self-imposed austerity situation. So what are the key actions that governments need to implement to ensure that funds are invested wisely? Historically, large-scale infrastructure projects have been linked to programme delays and cost overspends. Today, we'll hear about the considerations that investors need to consider very early on in project life cycles, showcasing those considerations through a live success story for a major UK healthcare project. I'm glad to be joined by Cara Thompson, Head of London Project Management, Dean Purvis, Head of Infrastructure, our Head of Cost Management, Paul Sweeney, and Healthcare Director, Victoria Head. So, looking at the last 7 weeks, the government has remobilised quickly to turn around essential field hospitals. What does this tell us about our current approach to project delivery, and what can our industry learn from recent events to bring vital projects to the market with increased agility and collaboration as we all look towards a new world?
Just from an infrastructure perspective, and at its widest sense, there are a number of reasons why those projects are hard, and they're very difficult to deliver. They're complex. They're normally of a scale and a size that is a mega project. They either affect a region or even a national effect on infrastructure or healthcare provision, whatever it is. Normally these jobs are big and have major impact in the market. And if you've got these big projects, you've got such large spend, you generally have multiple stakeholders. So you have very, very interested parties from the political side of things, from the community side of things, from industry bodies, and often, from the environmental side of things. So you get this sort of very difficult and very complicated web of stakeholders that all have the right, want to see the right outcomes on these projects, but the ability to manage those makes those extremely complicated. The timescales of these jobs are not, because they're so big, because they involve a lot of maybe DCO processes, a lot of pre-planning, a lot of pre-engagement stuff. These projects often take 5 years, 10 years, even longer to deliver. So the ability to have a clear plan and a clear baseline that covers those timescales is absolutely key. And if you've got projects over that sort of timescale, you tend to move across political cycles. So obviously, when there's political changes, often there's audits and assurance and reviews of these projects. So a lot of these infrastructure projects sometimes suffer from the need to have checkpoints and assurance points throughout the program due to their length. But I firmly believe that there's an opportunity for us to, and you're right, John, there is a period of austerity, self-imposed austerity, which has been driven by the effects of COVID-19. But it's the right thing to do to invest heavily in these large infrastructure projects. It's the way to get the economy going, and we absolutely agree. So you have the conundrum of these are difficult jobs. You've got a restricted source of money and time. So actually what we should be focusing on is how do we successfully deliver these jobs? And some of the key ingredients that I think we should explore is how do we actually look at setting these projects up for success from the get-go? We understand what the problems are. And we understand that if we can cut through some of the red tape, we can get a decision-making process that is effective and agile is key. If we can get absolute quality information to the stakeholders quickly so that we can present it in a way that decisions can be made fast and monitored so that we can make sure we're making those right decisions. And, we can link that back to the right baselines of cost, time and quality. I firmly believe that we can use this investment to get the economy going again while still delivering within the cost constraints that we find ourselves.
Thanks, Dean. And at that point, it'd be good to bring in Paul. Paul, obviously, Dean's laid down a bit of a challenge there in terms of setting up projects for success. So, from your position in terms of cost management, what does that look like?
Well, I think, John, what's interesting is we probably all saw, just to set the scene a bit, we all saw photographs of China building hospitals in literally days and weeks. And then look at what we've done. The Nightingale hospitals, I think, are a classic example of when there's a will, there's a way. And these have been built extremely quickly. So I think we've got to take some kind of review and understanding from that about how that's been achieved, because I do agree with Dean. There seems to me an awful lot of red tape, and at the end of the day, what the government's trying to do is to inject money into the economy, and that means money into individual pockets. So we've got to look at a way, I think, of just from a sort of procurement point of view of how quickly we can cut through to get these projects underway. And I think a lot of that, we've got good experience of recently. I think we've also got to look at the state of the industry coming out of COVID-19. And one of the issues is obviously going to be working in this sort of social distancing environment. So again, I think that's going to mean a lot of collaboration and we're going to need to look at how building contracts and infrastructure contracts are set up. We need to be thinking about that now. And again, this could really push, in my mind, off-site manufacture, because again, Victoria's probably going to tell us a bit about that, in the sense that that has been something that's been on the agenda for quite a while. But this is an opportunity now with social distancing to bring that to the fore. So I think if you start bringing all of those strands together, cutting through red tape, understanding collaboration better, I think it's a real opportunity to make a difference.
Thank you, Paul. That's a really good insight in terms of setting these projects up. Victoria, there's nothing better than obviously a real live example to evidence how success has been achieved. So this seems like an opportune moment to bring you in to talk about the fantastic success of the Grange Hospital that you and a team have achieved there with real true collaboration.
Yeah, and that's been at the heart actually, John, and the procurement route is key to that. So from the very, very, very early days, the use of the NEC was the centre part of that procurement strategy and of then the ethos that run through the project. And that collaboration and mutual trust and cooperation is probably one of the key reasons why the Grange has been a great success. And, reflecting on the last few weeks of a change that's affected all of us, but of being at the forefront of delivering the Grange University just under a year early to provide vital beds to the NHS, I truly don't believe we wouldn't have been able to have done that if we weren't a collaborative team. So the contractor wouldn't have come with the sort of can-do attitude. The client wouldn't have asked me and Gleeds as to how can we get this hospital open, and then we wouldn't have been able to support our NHS. There was a real desire for us all to work together and to get this right, and that was built on many years of working together. But it was also built on us understanding each other's objectives, and that, as I say, that's part of that collaboration piece. The reason that I believe the Grange is and will continue to be a success is that we've understood each other's objectives, and by understanding that, we've brought people in at the right time, and so the involvement of the contractor and the design team has been key. We've had our contractor and the design team involved from inception, which for many public sector projects is quite different, but that has allowed that understanding to be built all the way through. And so then when we were looking at how pre-start on site, how we were looking at ways that we could do things differently, we had the ability to open up those conversations. And that's one of the reasons why we at Gleeds were able to push forward the use of offsite manufacturing. We wanted this project to be different. And when selecting the contractor with the client and the design team, we looked for people that could work with us in an innovative way. And so the Grange has delivered something very different to many other healthcare projects in delivering over half of its project in using off-site manufacturing and design for manufacturing and assembly. That has brought huge benefits to all stakeholders in the project. So there's a whole piece around the programme savings, there's a whole piece that comes with it commercially, but also about in the quality of the product. And then when we sit here today, 4 weeks ago, just over 4 weeks ago, the client asked us to open those the hospital early. We wouldn't have been able to do that without the use of off-site manufacturing. We'd banked all of those early efficiencies and productivities that we'd gained from the use of off-site manufacturing, and we were able to turn that round and support the client and support the wider NHS, and that makes me feel very proud.
I think it's brilliant to hear, Victoria. Huge credit to you and the team that have helped deliver that hospital facility earlier. So, Cara, coming to a project management perspective, obviously, project management really sits at the top of the tree in terms of the design team and working with the clients. How do you see that sort of stakeholder engagement and collaboration piece moving forward?
I think it's critical to the success of any projects, whether they be, quick turnaround to respond to global crisis, or whether it be long-term mega infrastructure projects or general construction projects, really. Victoria picked up on it at the start, and really part of the success is defining the objectives, not just of the project outcomes, but of the client, the funder, the project team, the contractor, all of the, I guess, parties that are involved in taking that project from start to finish in one life cycle, I think is critical to the success, and really stopping to define those objectives. Often we pick up an idea where it's, okay, we'd like to get this into pre-app, how much is going to cost and what's the massing and how quickly can we get this done? And before we know it, there's a pre-app going in before we've actually looked back to define what the brief is. And Dean spoke about the importance of effective decision making, really sitting down with the client and defining the authorities and approvals on projects. And it sounds a lot about going back to basics, but really it is about going back to basics. 80% of any value on a project is achieved in the first 20% of its program. Really sitting back, understanding the objectives, defining the brief, vetting the brief, getting the brief agreed, and within that brief picks up on all various elements. But one important point is authorities and approvals, understanding who is the project sponsor, who is the project owner, and who can actually provide authority and make decisions when and as required. Great project managers can bring those decisions to the clients, but ultimately, how long is that going to take, and who does that need to go to be understood right at the very start of the project, can really be part of its success or failure as we move forward. Paul and I often talk, and our PM and CM teams in London often talk about, what's the best procurement methodology, and we often forget that there's at least 16 different types of agreed methods, let alone all the various form of contracts. The NEC on the Grange was particularly successful, but very quickly it's D&B JCT, and that's viewed as the procurement methodology rather than the form of contract. And it is, again, and I talk about this often, I'm very passionate about it, stripping it right back, and how are we procuring the project and all the various elements of the project and how that ties in. And it's really being an advisor in this space to say, look, we can take you from start to finish, going back to understanding the objective that Victoria spoke about being so important, and this is how we can take you through to get there. And ultimately then, particularly as a project manager, you need to lead that team through that brief and bring them in at various times to ensure that collaboration to ultimately produce its success. Everyone needs a piece of the pie. It's making sure that everyone gets the right piece of the pie at the right time.
I think that is absolutely key. And this is my point on these major infrastructure projects is, if you take a little bit of time to get the plan in place and think it through and have some absolute clarity of what we're going to do from a procurement schedule, from a stakeholder engagement perspective, How are we going to manage decisions, changes? How are we going to manage the budget? And I think that's what Victoria's saying, is that they thought about this from day one. They had a plan and they stuck with the plan. Now, stuff happens on projects. Of course it does. And making sure that you've got clarity of what you're trying to achieve, making those decisions and dealing with that stuff that happens on the way is so much more efficient, and you're more likely to get the right outcome as you navigate your way through these complex programs.
No, I agree. And I think, as you say, there's been some interesting points there. I mean, to me, the construction industry for a long time has been compared with other industries and generally received poor press. And this is a clear opportunity now for change. And I think, we've seen and heard this morning, various comments and, clear brief, properly defined, and ultimately this means right at the outset with feasibility, understanding the scheme properly and setting a clear budget, proper communication over what that budget includes and excludes, so it can be properly tracked. And it's got to make sure that risks are clearly identified and allowed for where we can, which I think then brings us on to this whole collaboration piece, because it is going to be so important. And I think the successful projects that move forward out of COVID-19 are going to be the ones where we see the most collaboration between clients, professional teams and contractor. And it's been needed for such a long time in our industry. Yes, we need to look at the forms of contract and the procurement routes, as Cara quite rightly said, but at the end of the day we do need collaboration. So there's a lot in there, but again, when you unpick it, and I think this phrase that we've used once or twice now, back to basics, is key. It's setting these right parameters at the outset, getting the money side of it clear and established, and then getting the buy-in from everybody to work together. And again, this whole business of people working together, we've seen that again over the last few weeks with people coming together across the UK. Some really key things there, I think, John, that the industry's got to really learn from, so that we come out of this with a better industry that is much more has increased productivity, better quality, delivered on time and to cost.
I think that's a really great insight, Paul, and some really key points in there. I mean, Victoria, we obviously we've talked about the success in terms of the sort of back end of the Grange project. What the aspects that Cara, Dean, and Paul have all sort of talked about, were they set up right at the outset of their project to enable that back end success?
Yeah, they were, John. So there was a lot of work done before we got to site, and actually what we set up from the outset was that we wanted to collect data on this, because often none of this is captured for us to be able to demonstrate later on. So before getting to site, so start on site, we had over 80% of the building designed and fully signed off. So that's huge for public sector projects, and really tricky. That took over 1,200 hours of design reviews with the client, a huge investment up front, but that has paid off. That provided the client with comfort that the team that they were working with, the design team and the contractor, they understood their needs. So there was that two-way understanding that really built confidence and, as I say, comfort, that allowed the client to feel like, okay, they do get what we want. So there was that bit around sort of stakeholder engagement. The other bit was then around how do we get Welsh Government and then the wider public sector signed off on us using a very different methodology. So whilst off-site manufacturing and prefabrication isn't new to our construction industry, for public sector projects, it's not that well tested. So we had to do a lot around demonstrating why it was right for the Grange University Hospital. So we did some modelling around what a traditional programme looked like versus what a design for manufacturing and assembly programme looked like. So the traditional programme was looking about 179 weeks for the Grange. And then with the use of off-site manufacturing, there was a programme put forward that we went into contract in at 137 weeks. So about a 23% difference in programme. And that's huge on any scale, but the size of the Grange that provided significant incentive for us all to say, let's commit to this and let's do this. And just some of the examples that we've collected data on since we started on site, and this time and motion study that I've spoken about before. So the use of precast facade panels with windows in situ, we've saved over 70,000 hours of on-site works. So when you think about that in terms of a programme saving plus a health and safety saving, I think this is really attractive to how we can mould and can change our industry. We're at a point of where we still have a huge skill shortage in our industry, and I think all of this starts to change that image which Paul mentioned of being lacking in efficiency, of being dangerous, etc. All of this plays into this. That actually, this industry is pushing forward to change, and with the Grange, we've now got the data that it's no longer a we could, we actually have, we did save. And I think that's what sets it apart, that what we've gathered is that this model can be picked up and rolled out in other ways and tailored, but that we've got evidence that says this is the way we want this industry to move.
Thanks, Victoria. I mean, that is so powerful to listen to. Just the takeaway from that, from me listening to the innovation of the modular techniques from the start, that real focus in terms of setting up the team correctly, the agile nature of the team and the collaborative effort really made it a huge success and delivered such an important scheme a year earlier than originally programmed. So thank you for that. So a final word from all of you. Well, what's the top takeaway that the industry can learn from the rapid turnaround we've seen of large-scale projects like the Grange University Hospital? And I'm going to come to you first, Dean, if I may.
Collaboration's the key to this for me, John.
Thank you, Dean. Cara?
As a true project manager, I have to say the brief.
Thank you, Paul.
Productivity, because that's going to deliver the cost savings, which are going to be beneficial to everybody.
And Victoria, just sort of reflecting back on the Grange, I'm only going to give you one word. So sorry to put you on the spot, but in one word, define what made that project such a huge success.
Innovation.
Fantastic. Well, we've heard some great insights there. So, thank you to you all. It's clearly a continuously evolving situation, and there's much to consider for the industry as we move forward. And you've raised some fantastic points there. So again, thank you all very much. Thank you for tuning in to Cornerstone. As always, we'd love to know your views, and you can continue today's debate through our online conversation, #GleadsCornerstone. We look forward to our next industry discussion with you.